Welcome to Polyamory for Dummies, PowerPoint presentation by Randy Richards. You may email me at imrandy@aol.com if you have questions or comments about this presentation. This used to be 5 presentations. I've condensed it into one very long 40-minute presentation. If you decide to read this to see what's upcoming, just pause it. I'm going to continue on to the next slide. We're going to start off with the word soup. So these are the absolute basics of polyamory, things that I think that people need to know in order to understand what it is. So let's start. We're going to start with sexual identity words. For example, cisgender, a person whose identity aligns with the gender assigned to them at birth. Asexual is a person that has little or no interest in sex, but may still form romantic relationships. Bisexual is a person that is sexually attracted to both men and women, although as you can see from the pie charts, not always equal each. Some are more attracted to men than women and vice versa. Pansexual, the sexual, romantic, or emotional attraction towards people regardless of their gender. Demisexual, a person that typically experiences sexual attraction after an emotional connection develops. Sapiosexual, a person that is sexually attracted to the intelligence in others. Heteroflexible, a person that considers themselves straight but isn't homophobic about touching the same gender. There are possibly several definitions of this. I find that this is the most common. However, it could also mean that you're okay with sexually touching another man or woman. Celibate, a person that abstains from sexual relations. And now we're going to move into relationship words. These are the polyamory words that everyone should know. So we're going to start with the obvious one, monogamy, being in one romantic relationship at a time. The opposite, of course, being non-monogamy, which is having overlapping romantic relationships or recreational sex with more than one person at a time. Concurrent, not necessarily at the same time, threesomes or anything like that. Ethical non-monogamy is when you're having overlapping romantic relationships or recreational sex with more than one person with the consent of all parties involved. And non-monogamy by itself can include ethical or unethical non-monogamy. Swinging is a type of ethical non-monogamy that focuses on recreational sex with multiple partners. Polyandry is the practice of having multiple wedded husbands at the same time. Polygamy is the practice of having multiple wedded wives at the same time, not to be confused with polygamy, which is the practice of having multiple wedded spouses, but is not gender specific. Regardless of gender, at the same time, polygamy just means more than one spouse. Bigamy is when you have multiple wedded spouses at the same time, but it's illegal. And of course, polyamory, engaging in multiple overlapping romantic relationships with the consent of everyone involved. A swally is a polyamorous swinger that engages in recreational sex and has meaningful overlapping romantic relationships. This word is not in widespread use, but I have heard it on occasion. Compersion, feeling joy when your partner has a relationship or sex with another person. And now this is about relationship structures within polyamory. A paramour is a partner that you have a direct poly relationship with. In the diagram, this would be Isabeth's paramour. She's at the top. A metamour is any other person your partner is in a relationship with. So in the case of Isabeth's metamour, that would be Sherman in the diagram. Lily was the paramour. And now we come to telemour. It's a partner of your metamour in which no other relationship connection exists between you. Co-spouses are when two people are married to the same spouse, specifically a co-wife or a co-husband, or sometimes called sister wives and sister husbands. A polycule is all the people connected through polyamorous relationships to you. So your polycule would be this diagram if you were any of those people. That includes Isabeth, and she has no connection to, I can't pronounce half of these names, Baxter. She has no connection to Baxter directly, yet he is a telemour, it looks like. Fluid bonding is the mutual decision not to use condoms with a partner. In polyamory circles, sometimes this is a big deal, sometimes it is not. Oftentimes, it's about the equivalent of going steady, let's say. The one penis policy, and often derided policy, is a polygynous relationship that only allows one man partner. It's sometimes considered bad because it suggests coercion, but if the ladies are into it and have no desire for another man, then it's perfectly fine and under the polyamory umbrella. If there's any coercion, either spoken or unspoken pressure, perhaps the lady does not want to cause waves, so she doesn't even suggest they bring in another man, that is not polyamory, or not considered polyamory. Everyone must be on board of their own free will. Gynocentric one-penis policy is exactly what that is. It's a polygynous relationship that only allows one man partner, but it's genuinely desired by all the women in the relationship, and the man too, of course. The egocentric one-penis policy is a polygynous relationship that only allows one man partner as initiated by the man, which I discussed earlier. And conversely, the one vagina policy, a polyandrous relationship that only allows one woman partner, and the same two modifiers apply to this as well. The unicorn, a single person that dates couples. Called a unicorn because demand wildly exceeds supply, making them seem rare and mythical. The relationship, once again, is often derided within polyamory circles, even though it is greatly sought after and desired, because some couples pervasively mistreat their unicorns. They act like she is a toy, a sex toy, and not a real person with feelings and emotions or some sort of equivalent romantic power within the triad. So those are considered abusive. However, many unicorn situations work just fine, so just be wary and aware that that exists. Now we come to entanglements. This can be anything such as mutually owned property, such as owning a boat together, some sort of bound finances, perhaps a personal loan that you co-sign, having children together, social entanglements such as friends or family, dual legal involvements, perhaps some sort of stocks or bonds, and a shared history together. A person in a 20-year marriage, it's very difficult for a new person who comes into that relationship to catch up because of all the entanglements. That person's always going to be 20 years behind the other person. unless great effort is taken to make her feel or him feel equal in the relationship. And that takes a lot of work. The relationship escalator. Typically, this goes with flirting, which leads to dating, sex, commitment, engagement, marriage, home, children, and repeat for each relationship. Now, not everybody follows the relationship escalator who's in polyamory, but some people do. They get married, have multiple spouses, and they have children with each spouse. And some do not. Some never get past the sex stage. Or dating stage for some cases, especially with asexual people. There are different types of polyamory, specifically two main ones, and that is kitchen table polyamory, which everyone in a polycule is comfortable sitting at the kitchen table together, and parallel polyamory, where no one in the polycule would likely meet anyone other than their immediate partner. So if you have a spouse, for example, a husband or a wife, and they are dating, it is quite possible that you will never meet the people that they are dating. A different type of structure which goes along with the other two is hierarchical polyamory. This is when some members of a polycule are intentionally more important than others. In the examples I've given previously, the spouse of 20 years has priority over the unicorn or the third person who's been added to the couple. This person is considered more important because of all the entanglements that they have together. Egalitarian polyamory, which some people will say is #goals, when no one in the polycule is more important than anyone else. Now, note that entanglements may create a pseudo-hierarchy, as I discussed earlier, regardless of how egalitarian your poly arrangement is. It's very difficult to catch up to a 20-year marriage where there's children involved. Now, the primary and secondary, that comes with the hierarchical polyamory, where the partner you have the most entanglements with is often the primary. Everyone else is typically a secondary. Although you can have more than one primary. It is certainly possible that there are levels to this. There are layers. Veto power. My personal opinion that this is not a good thing. In hierarchical polyamory, the ability of a partner to end any of their primary's relationships, no questions asked. But this treats people as transactional rather than individuals who have feelings. I don't think veto power is a good idea because it creates hindrances, and romance should be organic. And if you're going to have love, you need to have as few rules as possible, and that includes veto power. A nesting partner, in egalitarian polyamory, it's the partner you live with. Some people will say that nesting partner is a person you live with that you don't have a relationship with. I think it just depends on local colloquial usage. New relationship energy. At the beginning of a new relationship, dopamine, serotonin, adrenaline, oxytocin, and vasopressin flood the brain, creating a natural high. It's a good idea to be aware of new relationship energy so that you don't confuse it with falling in love. These are just chemicals. Love actually requires work and relationship work and time. A poly newbie is a person or couple new to polyamory experiencing uncertainty, conflict, and/or methodology confusion. I've encountered quite a few of them that think polyamory is when you have a triad and nothing else, or that polyamory is swinging. There are a lot of misconceptions out there that go along with being a poly newbie. And sadly, a poly wannabe is a person or couple that can't seem to make polyamory work for them despite continued efforts. A lot of this time it comes from frustration, perhaps some drama that sours them on polyamory, Or it could simply be that they have a low emotional IQ and they can't do the self-reflection necessary or the communication necessary to make polyamorous relationships work. Again, these are rare cases, but they are out there. Polysaturated is a whimsical word. The maximum number of poly partners a person can effectively sustain at one time. This is your maximum. Everybody is different. Some people don't require as much attention, so the number might vary within their relationships. Some people say, well, 3 is my max, but if you have a fourth person that you only see once every 3 months and they're okay with that, well, you might be able to add a fourth person. So again, it just depends on the other people, not so much you. Your number may vary. Solo poly, a single person that practices polyamory without the relationship escalator. Single person, no relationship escalator. And single poly is a single person that practices polyamory with little or no entanglements. Good luck remembering which is which. So this is single person, no escalator. Single person, no entanglements. No escalator, no entanglements. Good luck. Relationship anarchy, a type of non-monogamy wherein each relationship is fully equal to all others despite any entanglements. Very difficult to do. But I have known people that live this way. Polyanarchy is a type of egalitarian polyamory wherein each relationship has its own rules. In practice, this is where everybody winds up in the end in most cases. Because it's very difficult to find somebody that you're going to date who is also egalitarian, kitchen table polyamory, and the exact type of polyamory you have. Also, everybody has different needs. So one polycule might be parallel, and a person from there might date somebody who has a different polycule who is egalitarian. Those two may or may not work together, but you have to figure out which way it's going to go. So therefore, I would treat each relationship as its own, and polyanarchy is the ultimate goal. The ultimate result, even though the goal might be egalitarian and kitchen table. Retroactive poly is a person realizing they've been polyamorous all their life, they just didn't know a name for it at the time. You go, Fred. Monogamy transition. The adjustment period when transitioning to a poly lifestyle from a monogamous one. And the dreaded polyfuckery, claiming to be polyamorous to engage in sexual conquests. Now, sometimes this is subconscious. Sometimes this is just men or women trying to convince their partner to become polyamorous so they can have multiple dates every weekend. If that's the case, that's not really polyamory. You have to have real relationships and genuine intentions. I know sometimes it's difficult to distinguish between the two, especially if the person's fooling themselves into thinking they're polyamorous when they're just engaging in polyfuckery. The human mind has a great capacity for self-delusion. Alrighty then, we're going to now go to polyamory, the deconstruct phase, where we talk about social programming and emotions. Neil deGrasse Tyson said the most successful people in life recognize that they create their own love, manufacture their own meaning, and generate their own motivation. You gotta love me some Neil deGrasse Tyson. The man has 3 names. You can't go wrong with that. So let's start with social programming. Boy meets girl, they date, they fall in love, they pledge emotional and sexual fidelity, start a family, and settle down to live happily ever after. All too often, it continues on into misery, breakdown, separation, divorce, then boy meets new girl, lather, rinse, and repeat. like in the War of the Roses pictured. In one common variant of the heartbreaking cycle, boy meets girl, they settle down, one of them meets someone new, things get messy, a tragic choice must be made, and hearts are broken. Sometimes this is called the romantic comedy movie. Some solutions might be cheating, sneaking off and getting some action while your significant other is away, playing around, dating multiple people without telling said people, proselytizing, join a religious cult and marry a dozen teenagers, swinging, of course, having recreational sex while maintaining the one real relationship. But we choose number 5, which is polyamory. Multiple romantic relationships at the same time with full knowledge of everyone involved. So in polyamory, we have made a decision that people are not interchangeable. Monogamous relationships happen by default rather than by choice. We find the best person we can and then stick that person in the relationship slot. If you have a relationship with Pat and Riley is hotter and richer, then you can replace Pat with Riley and you climb the social ladder. Fill default relationship slot and repeat as needed. Polyamory is relationship by choice. When we value the things that make our partners who they are, no one person can ever replace another. Deconstructing the fairy tale. Let's take it apart, shall we? The fairy tale myth goes as follows. Well, monogamy echoes through our culture, and there are a few role models for polyamory. That's because we have decided as a culture, true love conquers all. Everyone has a soulmate out there somewhere. On finding said soulmate, we can live happily ever after, and love is all you need. That's what the Beatles said. But in the reality check, unlike in the fairy tales, people are not static. We live, we grow, we change. In a fairy tale, there's no need to work hard at understanding yourself or your needs. There's no need to keep working on happiness once you have found it. And that's mainly because this was invented in a time period where we only lived to be 30 to 40 years old, maximum. Let's deconstruct the emotions now. We're going to talk a little bit about jealousy first. It's the feeling that we're about to lose something important to us or to someone else. So it's the fear that we're not good enough, that people around us do not really love us, and that everything is about to turn to ash. It sits behind us whispering that we are the victim, not the villain, and that we must protect ourselves. Jealousy wears many faces because unlike fear or anger, it is built of many other emotions. Jealousy is built out of insecurity or fear of loss or territoriality or inadequacy, perhaps low self-esteem or a fear of abandonment. It's a shape-shifting monster. Jealousy often masquerades as other emotions. Before you can fight it, you need to see it for what it is. Some of the feelings that have jealousy at their root are fear, loneliness, loss, sadness, anger, betrayal, and humiliation, among others. It's a chameleon emotion. So on the other hand, those same emotions can arise in response to a genuinely hurtful situation. In those cases, it can be too easy to blame jealousy and duck the real issue. It's reasonable to ask yourself, am I really having these emotions just because I am jealous? Do you feel you're being listened to? Are you being offered genuine insight about yourself by someone who knows and cares about you? I mean, that's the key. Is this someone that knows and cares about you, or are they trying to manipulate you? It has to be genuine insight about yourself. Or are you being belittled and dismissed? And yes, I see the typo in the text. Are you managing jealousy? Another typo. means having enough insight to tell it apart from its imposter emotions, as well as external problems that may be developing. So let's talk about triggers. Often, jealousy is triggered by public behavior that we often associate with couplehood, and this is where the programming comes in. For example, things that might be triggers would be holding hands, sending flowers to a workplace, meeting parents, family photos with other partners. Why was I not invited? Condom wrapper in the trash, extra pair of slippers by the bed. All these typos. Seeing a partner have fun with someone else. All of these can bring up fears about being replaced or activate the "why am I not enough" script in your head. It can also lead to destructive comparisons. Are they sexier than I am? Smarter? Better in some way? Why am I a failure? Oh, the drama. So let's deconstruct jealousy for a moment and find out what can be done. The first thing you do is to confront jealousy, is to accept the feelings. You can't deal with jealousy by wishing it away or shaming yourself. Our emotions are what they are, and telling yourself, I should not feel this, won't work. Accepting that there's nothing wrong with you, accept that there's nothing wrong with you for feeling that way. Emotions are emotions. You can't control them. There's no such thing as a wrong emotions. It's what you do with those emotions that's important, and that defines who you are. So step 2 is separating the triggers from the causes. Examine your triggers, the specific thoughts, actions, sites, or events that set off an emotion. You've got to figure out what it is. It may require quite a bit of rumination. It may take weeks. Some people can do it fast. Some people it takes a long time. So it's easy to believe that these triggers are the cause of the emotion, but the truth is more complicated. If you feel a rush of jealousy when you see your partner kiss another person, it's not the kiss that is the cause of the jealousy. The kiss is the trigger. The cause is buried deeper, awakened by the trigger. So separating triggers from causes. The kiss, the trigger, is the switch that turns on a complicated chain of emotions. The fear of being replaced, the sense of territoriality, or something else. This chain reaction is why restrictions on specific actions like stop holding hands and I'll be fine, or behaviors like no kissing ever, rarely do much to alleviate jealousy. The beast still lies there waiting for some other poke or prod to awaken it. So rules in polyamorous relationships tend to put a band-aid on triggers, things that trigger jealousy. So rules are for insecurities. They try to put a band-aid patch on it. But again, all that does is patch the trigger. It doesn't solve the problem. You're just treating a symptom. So the third step is understand the feelings. And your feelings often lie to you. If you are afraid of snakes, you might feel panic at the sight of a harmless garter snake. The fear is genuine. But the thing it's telling you that this snake is a threat is not genuine. The garter snake is harmless. Getting to the roots of jealousy takes time. Don't act on it immediately. Take time to figure out what is really going on. Jealousy is about you. It is not, and I repeat this, it is not about the person you're feeling jealous of or the people around them. It's about you. Step 4, talk about it. Jealousy management relies on calming fears directly by talking about them and learning the way our partners feel about us. So acknowledge and own the fear. Ask for support to deal with it. For example, you might say, when you kiss, I feel jealous. That doesn't mean I want you to stop, but I sure could use some love and support. And step 5, just practice this security, because after 20 years, this is going to be like a knee-jerk reaction. You're not even going to feel the jealousy anymore. You'll feel a twinge and it'll disappear because you know it's not real. Insecurity invents evidence to support itself. It whispers in your ear that you are not valued and loved, even when you know those things aren't true. But these things feel real, and there's nothing wrong with feeling them. And yes, there's always a possibility that they are real. It can be difficult to tell whether you're really in danger of being abandoned, so practice will make you good at determining the difference. It could be something simple like tone of voice or body language or certain patterns that are repeated. Why are you closing all your bank accounts? So regularly tell yourself you are cherished and valued, and act with confidence, trust, and openness until you know for a fact otherwise. And as I said earlier, it is okay to be jealous. Jealousy by itself is just an emotion. It is morally neutral. It is the way the ancient reptilian parts of our brain tries to communicate with us. It might be pointing to a real problem in a relationship, or it might be our inner 3-year-old stomping its foot and saying, "I'm not getting everything I want." Being immune to jealousy is not a prerequisite for polyamory. So let's talk about some possible triggers. One of the most common is feeling left out. Our social values tell us it's okay for our partners to leave us for big chunks of time. Work, school, errands, military service, etc. And yet, we still feel alienated and alone if a partner is left behind for another romantic relationship. This is another example of a trigger. These triggers might happen for other activities, such as a partner visiting relatives, going out with drinking buddies, joining a bowling league without you. It's as if we have two classes of activities, those we do feel left behind and those we don't feel left behind. So why do we feel left out if there are lots of times when we are left out and we don't care? Well, romantic relationships carry social status. That's one reason. Also, you don't want to miss enjoyable activities. And another would be fear of not being their number one focus anymore. But remember, every relationship has its natural ebb and flow. Sometimes we do get temporarily supplanted. This happens even when there is no other relationship. One partner might be working on a master's and give more focus to that, or a new baby, which becomes the center of everything. But we trust that eventually there will come a time when we are the priority again. It's the same with polyamorous relationships. There are no hard rules for distinguishing insecurity from genuine signals of a painful truth, but there are signs to look for. A lack of empathy or compassion, for example, a partner that brushes off your fears or isn't willing to talk to you about your jealousy. They may be telling you that they're looking to leave for better options. Kind of overt, but much obvious, right? If your partners want to support you, they will listen to your fears even when your fears are irrational. Also, an attitude of entitlement. Are they willing to work with you to hear your complaints and to make choices that support you in the long run, even if your partner does not get what they want in the short run? These are questions to ask yourself and how to separate reality from jealousy. Ask yourself these questions. Am I worried about someone better may come along and replace me? Am I uncertain why my partner wants to be with me? Does my partner have another lover? Mean my partner will choose another lover over me? Do I feel I am unable to compete with most other people because they are sexier, more good looking, funnier, smarter, or just generally better than I am? Do I believe that if I'm not jealous, that I don't really love my partner? That's a very common monogamous relationship thing that I hear all the time. If you're not jealous, you don't love them. Bullshit. Do I think if my partner falls in love with someone else that they will leave me for them? All of these things are to separate the reality from from the jealousy. Do I think that if my partner has sex with someone better in bed than I am, they won't have sex with me anymore? Is sex the glue that holds our relationship together? Will it come unglued if they have sex with other partners? Do I believe other people are willing to do sexual things I'm not, and therefore my partner will like having sex with them better? Am I afraid my partner will compare me to other people they are having sex with? Am I afraid that anyone my partner has sex with will try to persuade my partner to leave me? Some final advice on deconstructing. Advice on keeping score. Keeping score will drive you insane. Don't do it. If you start counting the nights spent together, the dollars spent on dates, the sex acts engaged in, the hours on the phone or anything else of value, to compare it with what you're getting, no good can come of this. If someone is keeping score, it's generally because they are afraid of something. A scorecard does not get to the root of the problem. Don't keep score. All right, polyamory entanglements. This is about the final stages of the escalator. If you never plan getting on the polyamorous escalator, you can bail now. These are about how to marry multiple people, how to marry your finances, and how to have children with multiple people without worrying with financial protection as well as contractual protection. Dean Spade said, "The point of polyamory is to create relationships based on deeper notions of trust so that love becomes defined not by sexual exclusivity, but by respect, concern, commitment to act with kind intentions, accountability of actions, and a desire for mutual growth." Smart man. Entanglements with marriage. So ask yourself, why do you want to get married? Well, the typical answer is, we love each other and we want to share our lives together. It's a noble cause. So then you ask, why do you want to hold a wedding? People will say, we want a public ceremony to make a commitment in front of our family and friends. Again, a noble purpose. Sounds like fun, too. Any excuse to party. But why involve the state with your marriage? You can do all of the following without a marriage license. Get a minister or officiant, book a hall, speak your vows, hold a reception afterwards, live together, buy a house, and have children. So again, why involve the state? Well, the answer, of course, is government benefits. It's so ingrained into our government, marriage, that there are literally thousands of benefits. Some of which include change your name without going to court, file income taxes jointly, you get to list your spouse as a dependent, you get joint insurance through an employer. If you die, your children get most of your property managed by your spouse. Your spouse can speak for you if there's a medical emergency. Your spouse can direct the medical care of your children should you not be available. And any property gained during a marriage is considered community property. So the categories of these government benefits typically fall into 5 categories: inheritance benefits, insurance benefits, medical decisions, children, and tax benefits. So, how do you get these 5 government benefits without a state marriage? Well, let's talk about it. Benefit number 1, inheritance benefits. So you can write a will or create a trust. If you have enough property to matter, a living trust is a more foolproof option than a will. A will can be contested in probate, but a trust cannot. A living trust is a corporation that you own with another person. If any person in the corporation dies, the owner the rest of the trust splits the possessions equally. So again, a trust with the other people works out pretty good. Insurance benefits. To get these, you can start a business together. The business has to be somewhat legitimate in the sense that you do have to have the articles of incorporation and so forth. You can join an HMO, or you can look into the Affordable Care Act for insurance there. A business can get its insurance through a major medical plan and a medical savings account. So starting a business together is a pretty good option for the average person. Medical decisions are easy. Medical power of attorney is all you need. So you designate a person or persons. You can designate more than one. The whole polycule can have medical power of attorney to make medical decisions, and only medical decisions for you if you become incompetent, i.e. unconscious. So children and custody, write a will or write a co-parent agreement. It is important for each parent to have a legal will and name 2 guardians for each child. Contested guardianship is possible, and courts tend to favor blood relatives or the highest income. And this is especially true when relatives are deemed upstanding citizens. But even a state-sanctioned marriage suffers from this possibility, so this is not something specifically about polyamory. There is no foolproof way to do such a thing. Now, tax benefits. Own a legitimate business together, you can get the same benefits that married couples get. Preferably an S corporation. The family money is pooled into the business, and anything it purchases for the business is pre-tax. The business can pay for internet, part of rent and utilities, for example, home office business expenses, computer purchases, cell phone costs, and this should more than make up for the tax benefits married couples get. So let's talk about the paperwork that comes along with all this stuff, all these benefits. Joint property. So a marriage is nothing more than a private welfare state for 2, in which all debt and profit are shared as marital property, unless these terms are tweaked by a prenup. If a triad or a quad, for example, wants to buy a house together, they would do well to create a limited liability corporation to share financial accounts. This form of co-ownership is legally binding for all forms of property, mimicking the community property laws of state marriage. Co-parenting. For triads, quads, or more, a careful co-parenting agreement can protect a non-biological parent, but it does have to be carefully worded. These are, in effect, custody agreements similar to those created by divorcing parents to address custody and visitation access. Proportion of financial support, for example, child support, schooling, medical care, and religion. And all of this would be spelled out in a sort of a pre-co-parenting agreement. Alimony contract is a possible thing. There may be instances when a stay-at-home parent wants financial protection from a breakup, which stands to reason. In a traditional divorce, this would be handled after the fact via negotiation through lawyers and judges, perhaps tweaked by a prenup. But similar to a prenup, a financial contract is created between 2 people, and a clause that states how much financial assistance will be paid and by whom should the romantic relationship end and under what circumstances. You can be as vague or as specific as the 2 of you agree on. A domestic partnership is something that has already been in widespread use. This type of non-marriage arrangement is called a domestic partnership. They were originally created as an alternative for gay couples that couldn't legally get married. And surprisingly, domestic partnerships started to be used for other arrangements of people. Elderly friends, for example, started using them as agreements for living together platonically. Think Golden Girls. That way it spells out who does what and is, in effect, a contract similar to marriage. So let's talk about the obscure stuff about these entanglements. There are some unobtainable benefits because there is approximately 1,200 rights and privileges to being in a legal state-sanctioned marriage, but most of them are rare. For example, being buried next to your spouse in a government cemetery. A legal spouse cannot testify against you in court. Also, a foreign spouse can become a legal citizen via marriage. For most people, these rare benefits will never come up. Anthony Ravenscroft said, "A real polyamorous relationship doesn't begin until the new relationship energy burns away. That's when you have to start dealing with this person as a human being, replete with irritating habits and other peccadillos. When disillusion sets in, then love can begin. Very smart man. All right, we're going to briefly talk about intersections, about polyamory, and things like swinging, homophobia, misogyny, finances, sexism, racism, and mental illness. First, I want to talk about mental illness. We're going to define mental illness as a normal mental function that has grown to such an extreme it becomes life-disrupting. We're not talking about debilitating mental illnesses where the person can't even function. These are people that can function, and in this case, it just becomes life-disrupting because something has gone to the extreme. Manic and NRE. So, partners of those with bipolar disorder are familiar with manic episodes. These bursts of energy, optimism, and irrationality can last anywhere from hours to months. It's not hard to see how the brain drain of new relationship energy combined with the irrational exuberance of a manic phase could lead to drama. OCD and fairness. So we talked about keeping score earlier. Don't do it. But if you have OCD, you probably can't not do it. We all have a desire for fairness, and in poly relationships, it's dangerous to keep everything balanced, where everyone must get the same amount of time, sex, and gifts. You combine it with OCD, again, can quickly create drama. Now, depression often involves a depressed mood, a lack of interest in activities, low energy, and low self-esteem. So for partners that don't understand depression, the limited sex life and frequently canceled date nights can seem personal. Depression only affects expression. It does not affect how people feel about others. So good dates or activities for depression might be at-home movie night, curled up on the couch with popcorn, sitting on the porch, blowing bubbles, eating out at a casual restaurant close by, going for a walk, or any sit-down activity. So how do you support somebody that has depression or mental illness in general? Well, listen, people with mental illness know their needs better than anyone. Be patient. Sometimes figuring out what is going on with emotions takes time and work. Limits. Mental illness limits the amount of activities one can do in a given day. When one reaches the limit, one cannot do anything else for the day. In other words, if you have a bunch of spoons at the beginning of the day, and every time you do something, you give up one of those spoons, as soon as you're out of spoons, you're done for the day. You can't do anything else. Educate yourself. You can speak with a professional, research online, get books, or just ask. Learn cues. Each person has their own cues that signify dealing with an issue. Perhaps you'll learn them, perhaps they already know them. Sometimes it's okay to give a gentle push. Suggest an easy date or activity. And the key word there is easy. Also, shut down idiots. Stigma against mental illness is rampant. So if you see a partner taking crap from anyone over their mental illness, back them up. Support is very important. All right, a brief commentary on homosexuality. Where are gay poly friends? You don't see them a lot in groups. Where are they? Well, they already have established social networks. They're not going to be in your network. Research indicates that consensual non-monogamy is a regular feature of gay male society. With community norms already in place and a social pool of potential dates already open to consensual non-monogamy, gay men don't have to approach a different community to find partners or seek advice. Also, non-monogamy is a hot potato issue. Although there are plenty of lesbian and gay polyfolk, the fragile state of gender minority rights makes it uncomfortable to politically align with any form of consensual non-monogamy because it reminds conventional folk of polygamy. Some mainstream gay and lesbian power structures are actively hostile to polyamory since they see it as posing a threat to recent gains in civil rights. Homophobia, a dislike or prejudice against homosexual people. And as Morgan Freeman said, I hate the word homophobia. It's not a phobia. You are not scared. You are an asshole. I agree with that. We're still going to call it homophobia because that's the colloquial term, even though it's somewhat of a misnomer. Research indicates that poly communities tend to have lower levels of homophobia than conventional society. However, there's a double standard. Poly communities tend to value female bisexuality and same-gender contact among women far more than same-gender contact among men. So what are the inhibitors for allowing gay men and women to be in average poly circles, I should say? I don't like to say normal. Gay men do not typically enjoy dealing with homophobia in their social environments, so it's no surprise that they are rare in predominant polyamory circles. In addition, many lesbians get tired of fending off straight guys who want threesomes with two women. Plus, because of the comparative rarity of single women in many poly communities, lesbians are often competing with straight men for a limited pool of bisexual women. Too much work for too little fun. I wouldn't be there either. Let's talk about intersection with finance. There are economic barriers to being polyamorous. You think that there wouldn't be because two can live as cheaply as one, and so can three and four and five. But time and logistics can keep all but the most determined poor or working class people from being easily poly. Working 2 or 3 jobs and spending hours a day on public transit make it hard to maintain one relationship, much less have time to date multiple people. In addition, living in subsidized housing often means constant surveillance and questions about who is spending time in the household. I know that's surprising to people that aren't low income, but if you have subsidized housing, they are making random visits, and you have no right to refuse the visit. You have to allow them to come in. Somebody can tattle on you that you had an overnight guest, and they will come do an inspection of your apartment or wherever it is that you're living to make sure no one else is living there. All right, intersection with sexism. A couple of definitions are necessary to discuss this. Gender roles are one. A set of societal norms dictating the types of behavior, which are generally considered acceptable and appropriate for people based on their gender. Sexism, which is defined as prejudice, stereotyping, or discrimination on the basis of gender. I think Jughead might be in trouble if he doesn't change his ways. And misogyny is a dislike, contempt, or ingrained prejudice against women. Unicorns, as we discussed earlier, our popular polylingo makes it clear that the most valued partner is a unicorn, an unattached bisexual woman eager to join an established couple to be their sex partner. She is labeled unicorn because she is so rare as to be nearly mythical, as I said earlier. So let's talk about selfish unicorn hunters. These unicorns are usually expected to provide extensive emotional labor to the couple, conforming to their rules, respecting their related primacy, engaging in communication at their behest, providing sexual services on the couple's terms, all while making few demands on the couple or seeking support from other partners. These gendered expectations can be sexist, misogynistic, and borderline abusive, which is why some unicorn hunters are unsuccessful in their search for a woman to fit that role, and why also they are giving unicorns a bad name, and triads as well. Unicorn hunting, a bad name. And we talked earlier about the selfish one-penis policy. This is also somewhat misogynistic and sexist. So the thing about the selfish one-penis policy is that a ban can be explicit, with rules that restrict sex with other men, or implicit, which I said earlier, through jealous drama that makes it too much work to date men. So that's the implicit. If you are a woman and you truly don't want more than one man, there's nothing wrong with having an unselfish one-penis policy in place. But if the reason you don't want any other men is because your man might have a meltdown, then that's a red flag for a potential relationship problem. And now let's talk about intersection with ethnicity. Racism, by definition, is prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against someone perceived of a different race, typically on the belief that one's own race is superior. And of course, racism can mean the entire governmental structure, how it's built into the system, or some people talking about overt racism on a localized level. This is more of that definition of racism. Diversity. When we say diversity, what we often mean is multiculturalism or ethnic diversity and its promotion. Although poly relationships are quite diverse, the people in mainstream United States poly communities share some significant similarities. The vast majority are white, even though your localized areas might be different. The vast majority as a country are white. They're middle to upper class, ages 30 to 65 with high levels of education, typically live in urban or suburban areas, and often work at professional jobs in IT, education, or healthcare. As a whole, they tend to be non-religious or practice uncommon religions like paganism, Unitarian, or Buddhism. And remember, this is average. Obviously, everyone knows exceptions to this. You may know thousands of exceptions, but there are millions of Americans, and this is the average. There are also ethnic barriers. People of color typically give three main reasons why they are reluctant to attend mainstream poly community events. 1. Nervous they might be fetishized or objectified and seen as two-dimensional novelties to be experienced rather than seen as a full person. The apparent immorality of polyamory in a religious context makes it less likely that self-respecting or upstanding citizens would participate. And 3, confirms the stereotype that people of color are sexually animalistic with out-of-control libidos. All of which make perfect sense of a reason to stay away. All right, intersection with swinging. Now, swinging has a lot in common with polyamory. I mean, it's comforting to have these tidy labels. Swingers do sex, polyamorous do love. Swingers is fast food, polyamory is a gourmet meal. Swinging is cheap, polyamory is rich. Swinging is fucking, polyamory is sensuality. However, swingers and polyamorous have a lot in common. The problem with labels is that they're so small and the groups of people they describe are so big. Some people shift within this group and the label starts to strain. Or they fall out of the description altogether and you make a mess trying to stick them under another label. But if one starts peeling off the labels and the clothes with them, both groups start to look similar. The core of polyamory is multiple consensual sexual loving relationships, whereas the core of swinging is multiple consensual sexual relationships. So it's minus the romance/love. And our entire culture is negative towards sex, and we've internalized that. Reading the comments in some poly groups, many polyamorous see swingers as drooling, immoral, mindless morons who will screw anything that moves. Now, once this attitude is established within a community, we can then compare ourselves to them in a positive light, and we can convince monogamous people that, yes, we do this sort of thing too, but we are benign and loving by comparison. We have othered the swingers. But that doesn't stop a substantial number of self-identified polys from engaging in the same practices that self-identified swingers do. They may not do them in swing clubs, but they do them at home and elsewhere, sometimes casually among friends. A triad can engage in a threesome, and everybody's like, well, they're all married, so what difference does it make? Well, they're doing the same thing, just the relationship is different. So nor does this limit swingers from forming multifaceted loving relationships with longtime swinging friends. Whether they choose to acknowledge the depth of these relationships or not, they are happening. I've seen polyamorous groups where the same people go every time, and yeah, they're all fucking each other, but they're also having conversations. Sometimes they even see each other outside and go out and have a good time. I mean, they're effectively in a polyamorous relationship, whether they admit it or not. And just a reminder, the word for this is swally, again, not in widespread use. And here's a list of helpful online forums. I'll keep the video going for another 30 seconds. This is the end, and I want to thank you for tuning in to this very long presentation on polyamory, and I hope that you gained some insight from this, learned something, perhaps helped you out a little bit, and if you would, please forward it to your polyamory curious friends so that they can know what's what and how this is. If you need any of the forms, you can either email me or you can go to these links that I have listed there. Those links will take you directly to the forms, which you can then save and print on your home computer. So I want to thank you. This is the end of the presentation, and have a nice polycule.